Okay. Hi, all. Thanks for joining today's webinar on improving and expanding ESS-DIVE reporting formats. Just as a quick note, we will be recording the webinar. However, during Q&A periods, we will pause the recording to allow free-form conversation and feedback without that being recorded. And then we've also created a shared meeting notes document where you can provide more specific questions or feedback that you have there if you'd prefer. And someone can put that in the link or in the chat. So today you'll be hearing from myself. I'm Dylan Orion, a research associate at Berkeley Lab. You'll also be hearing from Danielle Christensen, a computer systems engineer at Berkeley Lab, and Amy Goldman, who is an earth scientist at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And just want to mention that while you'll be only hearing from us three, this work represents efforts by many different folks on the ESS-DIVE team and our partner projects, including Brianne Forbes, Stephanie Pennington, and Ben Von Lamberty. And so in today's webinar, we will share an overview of ESS-DIVE reporting formats and the general direction we're headed in the latest version of the reporting formats. You'll then hear from Danielle and Amy on specific reporting format updates, including the location metadata reporting format and the harmonization effort of the water soil sediment chemistry and hydrologic monitoring reporting formats. And then as time allows, towards the end of the webinar, we'll have time for general discussion and Q&A. And so the primary goal of today's webinar is for us to share and have you all learn about the directions we're headed with the reporting formats, and in particular, focusing in on improving usability and enabling AI-ready data. And also we see this webinar as a really important opportunity to hear feedback from you all, the community, on the progress and revisions that we're planning to make before they're fully finalized. And so, as folks may not all be familiar with what the ESS-DIVE reporting formats are, fundamentally the reporting formats are a set of instructions that are typically accompanied by templates and tools for consistently formatting data. And when I mention that reporting formats are community developed and driven by ESS-DIVE and our partner projects along with the ESS community. And so there is a difference between a reporting format and an international standard, which are generally internationally driven and developed. So just want to mention that the reporting formats do differ slightly to standards, which you may be familiar with. And the reporting formats in particular contain specifications on required file structures and formats. They include defined variables and units, and include required, recommended, and optional variables, really designed to enable flexibility for adoption of the reporting formats. And so currently in use, there are 6 general reporting formats that apply to a wide variety of data on ESS-DIVE. And then there are 6 data type specific reporting formats that apply to specific data types that are common within the DOE ESS community. And so in the next few slides, I will be highlighting one general reporting format that applies to all data sets on ESS-DIVE. And this is really designed to illustrate the primary components of a reporting format and to give folks an idea of what generally is involved with a reporting format. So as mentioned, I'll be highlighting the file level metadata reporting format, which as mentioned, applies to all data on ESS-DIVE and is strongly recommended for all data sets on ESS-DIVE. And the reporting format contains 2 primary files. The first file is what's called the file level metadata file that describes all files contained within a single data set. And the reporting format provides a template, and an example is shown here on the slide with standard variables to describe the contents within a single data package. And the file level metadata reporting format file only contains 2 required fields, a file name and file description, which is really designed to aid in the ease of use of the reporting format. And the second file as part of the file level metadata reporting format is what's called the data dictionary file. And this describes how column or row headers within CSV files within a single data set. Similar to the file level metadata file that I shown in the previous slide, there are required, recommended, and optional fields designed to support the ease of use of the reporting format and allow flexibility for users to provide the information that they see as being necessary to describe their data set. And so the reporting format provides a specific template for the data dictionary file that has standardized column headers that can be used across datasets on ESS-DIVE. And so zooming into the data dictionary further, the data dictionary, as mentioned, describes all of the column headers within a data set. So an example, the top screenshot or image here shows its CSV file. And then within the accompanying data dictionary file, all of the column headers are described, including units and definitions, and other more data type specific information. And importantly, the data dictionary paired with data files and the file level metadata file really serve as a basis for what we're calling lightweight options for data type specific reporting formats. And these lightweight options won't be the focus of today's webinar. We'll be kind of discussing the more full encompassing reporting format direct templates. But just want to mention that there will be a lightweight option for folks to, if they choose to use that, if they don't have all of the necessary metadata required for the full set of the reporting formats. And reporting formats are really crucial in enabling deeper search within ESS-DIVE. And as data contributors on ESS-DIVE have been adopting reporting formats over the last several years, we've been able to develop tools to support discovery of data on ESS-DIVE, which has been a really important component of the reporting formats aspect. And so in particular, we've had over 400 published data sets thus far on ESS-DIVE adopt the file level metadata reporting format. And we just want to we appreciate everyone's willingness to adopt the reporting formats, which as mentioned, the file level metadata reporting format is strongly recommended, but not required at this point. And so the file level metadata reporting format, which I talked about in the past previous slides, accompanied with a CSV metadata reporting format that provides guidelines and best practices for formatting CSV files, form the basis of our search tools that we've developed. And so in particular, data sets that adopt reporting formats on ESS-DIVE are parsed by what's called a Fusion database, which is built upon these two reporting formats to be able to parse data files and pull out information about the data files themselves. And so this information within the Fusion database then is pulled into the Deep Dive API that allows users to search within files themselves instead of searching on the dataset metadata that often describes the full dataset contents, which could be across hundreds or thousands of files. And so these reporting formats really provide a very important search tool to be able to search directly within files and to be able to find exactly what you're interested in, instead of having to comb through dataset metadata or many data sets that you may be interested in. In addition to being able to provide more specific advanced data discovery and integration efforts, the reporting formats also support and improve human and machine readability. They increase data fairness, which is really an important component of publishing data in general. And so in this first version of the reporting formats, we were particularly focused on supporting the generation of fair data and improving the human understanding of data sets on ESS-DIVE by including well-descriptive metadata. And also we were interested in standardizing reporting and publishing of data of common ESS data types on ESS-DIVE. However, in the second version, we've been particularly focused on generating AI-ready data and machine-readable data, which is an important component as we're seeing a push towards AI within the broader ecosystem of science. So I kind of mentioned in my earlier slides that we've developed 6 data type specific and 6 general reporting formats. And you can see here from this figure, they really spanned a wide variety of common data types that you may collect. In particular, there are high-level reporting formats, including a location reporting format, which you'll hear more from Danielle on a little bit later. And then there are data type specific reporting formats, such as the hydrologic monitoring and water soil sediment chemistry reporting format, which Amy will be discussing. But there are many other data type specific reporting formats, including leaf gas exchange, UAS, Amplicon, et cetera. And so we really found that this cohesive set of reporting formats is really important kind of in the first version of reporting formats. And so stepping a bit back and to discuss the development process of the reporting formats, at its core, the reporting formats were community-driven and informed efforts. And in particular, during the kind of first version of the reporting format development process, partner projects interviewed and discussed with experts, particularly within the domain that they were working in. And we discussed and received feedback from over 200 experts representing 100 institutions. And so we really see this webinar as being, an important opportunity to hear feedback from the community before the revisions of the reporting formats are finalized. And if you're interested in learning more about the development process of reporting formats, this paper here in the slide could be interesting to read further. And as mentioned, the kind of partner projects are really an essential component of the reporting format process. And so in this second round of partner projects in 2024, we were particularly focused on supporting adoption of the reporting formats by developing tools and providing lightweight options or more pared down versions of the reporting formats. We're also interested in harmonizing the reporting format suite that we developed, as well as developing new reporting formats based on community need. And so in specific, in this latest version of the reporting formats, we had a set of primary goals. And the first goal was particularly focused on harmonizing a suite of reporting formats. The second primary goal was particularly informed by feedback of early adopters of the reporting formats. And we were really interested in lowering the barrier or the effort required to adopt reporting formats. And we've been really focused on developing tools to support adoption and offering lightweight options for data type specific reporting formats. Similarly, we were also informed by data users of data on ESS-DIVE. And so we're using that feedback and information to focus on lowering the barrier to downstream use of the reporting formats and data formatted following these reporting formats. And so that's also been an important component of the revision process. And then lastly, kind of given the focus on AI within Department of Energy and more broadly within the scientific community, we're particularly interested in integrating the reporting formats into AI-ready formats. And these revisions have been driven by various DOE AI initiatives, including Genesis efforts such as the ModCon and American Science Cloud efforts, as well as BER data integration efforts through the Bridge effort. And what we learned from discussing with through these AI initiatives, we learned that there was a need for schematizable or schema-ready reporting formats, as well as machine-readable formats, which hadn't been a focus in the first version of the reporting formats. And moving towards AI-ready reporting formats, there is a need to decrease some flexibility of data templates, which caused issues in terms of trying to use the data and integrate data. And it also requires the use of controlled vocabularies, which are really important in terms of standardizing data variables across data sets on ESS-DIVE. And so in the latest revisions to the reporting formats, we set out to revise several of the existing reporting formats, including the location metadata reporting format, which you'll hear from Danielle on, and also harmonizing the hydrologic and water soil sediment chemistry, which Amy will be presenting on later today as well. But we also focused on developing new reporting formats that were of interest to the community, including ATS model data archiving reporting format. So I'll just pause quickly. That's all we had in terms of overview of reporting formats and the directions we're heading. So I just want to pause and see if there's any questions, and I'll pause the recording now as well.
Right. Everyone see that? Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. So Danielle Christensen here from Berkeley Lab, and I want to acknowledge Dylan's role in working on the revision of the location metadata reporting format, and the many people that we've talked to and getting feedback and along this process. So thanks. So I want to start off with just showing you what the current location metadata reporting format looks like. This is an example here. It's a pretty lightweight template designed to report information about point locations. Again, like the other reporting formats, a mix of required, recommended, optional fields. The 4 columns, beginning columns here are required. And I will also point out that latitude and longitude is WGS 84. So it's pretty well-defined reporting format, but again, only about points. So we, in this round 2, were tasked with re-looking at this reporting format because we were getting some feedback from some of the early adopters that they want to describe more than points. There's also some integration issues across the other reporting formats. And so that was one of the motivations here. So this has been, it seems simple when you started, but of course when you get into the details, that's the challenge. So so we're going to present to you what we've got. We've had to think about different ways to define non-point locations, looking again at the other standards that are out there and trying to find the one we thought worked the best with the community here. So we want to also support the different coordinate reference systems, not just WGS 84. And yeah, so finally, I'll just say the approach. So we had some constraints on what we could do. We needed to keep some backwards compatibility, respond to the feedback, and again, try to meet these goals of supporting non-point locations, different coordinate reference systems, and harmonizing with the other reporting formats. Okay, so these are the takeaways. So we're continuing to support the core required fields of location ID, description, and the lat and long, again, in WGS 84. We've got some new fields to support non-point locations, some new fields to support diverse coordinate reference systems, and some new optional fields, and we've retired some. And of course, like all the other reporting formats, we're going to snake case for headers, so you'll see that change. So I'm going to step through kind of the new fields and really interested in your feedback on some of these choices. Okay, so the 3 main fields additional new fields to support non-point locations. So we have a concept of a location type, which is describing kind of category of location that you've got. A location shape, which is the geometry of the location you have. And both these 2, we want to use controlled vocabularies that we'll go through on the next slide. And then finally, a location coordinates field to capture the coordinates. And we're thinking we want to go with GeoJSON style reporting or formats for reporting those coordinates. But we also have an option to, if you had like a KML or a GeoJSON file, we have a mechanism where you could have a file with those coordinates in them instead of putting them into the reporting format. Okay, so looking a bit more at this location shape and location type. So we're proposing 3 location shapes to capture the majority of physical location types that people in earth science tend to observe information on. So we already have the points, but we're adding curve and surface. And you can see here the descriptions of those. So it's really about kind of conceptualizing what this location is, and this really is going to drive like how we interpret the coordinates that you give us. How do we make sense of those coordinates? And then location type is a category of the location. So we've got a proposed control vocabulary here with some examples. And we've looked across a bunch of different other standards or you know, repositories, schemas out there, which have a variety of different control vocabularies for these. And we want to kind of try to keep it tight. So that's where we're proposing a limited set that captures a lot of these type examples that you see here that you might see in other control vocabularies. So this table is repeated in the Google Doc because we'd really love your feedback on this. And I will keep going and we can ask questions about it in a bit. Oh yeah, I forgot. Thanks for the automation. So the next slide here is about the new fields for the alternate coordinate system. So we do recognize a lot of folks take, locate their locations in, say you're using like a UTM and you've got northing and easting, or say you even have like a local coordinate system that's just relevant to some point, but it's actually important to the relative locations of the observations, but you don't have those geo-rectified or tied into any known datum system. So this is a way to approach that. So this would be, so you wouldn't give a lat long. Here in this case, you would use this X and Y coordinate fields. You need to specify your coordinate system. We would like to have a control vocabulary for this. We're interested in hearing from y'all what types of coordinate reference systems y'all typically use, and that will help guide us. Our proposal right now is to use the EPSG codes, a term called locals for if you have a local field, and then possibly custom CRSs in a known format. We're saying the proj format here, but we are open to suggestions there. And then finally, the coordinates units that you're taking, so meters, feet, decimal degrees. Yeah, and I'm gonna back up. I realized I'm missing. So in all cases, a lat, an X and Y are required. It's either this X and Y or the lat long. And in case for non-point locations, that would be a representative point. So say you've got an area, we'd like you to describe it, as a point, but then you can add the other coordinates to describe the fuller boundary of that area. So let's see. So additional changes, we've added a location name. That's a free text field, just if you want to tell us more, like if your project has names that you want to utilize. And then we are retiring some fields that just seem like they didn't quite make sense. They're listed here. We can take questions on those. Yeah, and that's what we have. I think, Dylan, we're going to pause the recording for any questions or thoughts right off the bat. But we can also have more questions later. So
Does that look normal?
Yeah, that looks great. Thanks, Amy.
Wonderful. Okay, now just give me a moment to get my Zoom back. Okay, great. Yes, so I am going to be talking about two of the reporting formats that Dylan mentioned before that are more specific types of reporting formats. So that's the water, soil, sediment, chemistry reporting format and the hydrologic monitoring reporting format. That's at least what it was for version 1. And so now we are in the process of harmonizing across these two reporting formats and also sort of generalizing them a bit more. Hydrologic monitoring was really for sensor data that was specific to hydrologic monitoring, but now we're broadening it to a more general sensor data reporting format. So ultimately, we'll end up with something that works for sample data and time series data, sensor data included, both the sort of lightweight version that Dylan mentioned and the full version. We're going to be talking about the full version today. And specifically, rather than getting sort of a whole overview of the changes that we're considering, like Danielle just did, we're really going to be digging into one specific point that we would really like feedback on. So we're going to get a little bit in the weeds. Hopefully that's okay with all of you. And we're going to be talking about how we document methods information specifically. So a little bit of context kind of before we dive into that, just to get a better understanding of what data we're talking about. So these reporting formats will work for sample data that's collected in the field or generated in a lab and analyzed either at a single point in time or at multiple points in time. So examples for that, if you collect sediment and then you analyze it for grain size, or if you have one vial that you're measuring dissolved oxygen in every minute. Similarly, it will also work for sensors, either at a single location through time or at multiple locations through time. So if you have a sensor that's deployed in a permanent station in a river, or if you're towing a sensor from a boat and it's recording as you move. So getting into the kind of methods piece of things, we're talking right now about method IDs. And so method IDs are alphanumeric user-defined IDs that embed methods information. So if, for example, you have a method that says samples were sieved to less than 2 millimeters in the field and flash frozen immediately, you can represent that in your data with a method ID, in this case, GRN_01. Again, these are user-defined. You can write whatever you want. And so if you have a set of these method IDs, you need to define what they mean somewhere. And so that is defined in a methods and attributes file. And then digging in a little bit about into what else is contained in that file. So it lists all of the method IDs that you use in your data package. There's a free text description field, and then there's also optional descriptive columns. So you can specify your instrument type, detection limit, precision, if you want to get into the specific temperatures or light or atmosphere or hold times used, if you want to say what lab was used, references for your method, anything else. So you can really kind of dig into how descriptive you want to get. So this system for method IDs works in two ways. It's used to describe kind of normal anticipated methods, but also changes or deviations from the norm. So a normal method, as I just said, might be that you wanted to sieve your samples in the field and freeze them immediately. But you might have some cases where you had to change your method and samples were instead collected in bulk in the field and then sieved or frozen in the lab. You know, these things happen. We need to have a way to document them. So today, we're talking specifically about how do we link the method IDs to data values. It's not enough, obviously, to have just here's a list of your methods in a separate file. We're talking about how we actually create that relationship to the data. And so for the method changes or deviations, we have an approach that we'll talk about, but we're not so much looking for input specifically on that. If you have input, we're happy to hear it. But more specifically for the kind of normal or expected methods, we have three different options that we want to go through with you. And so that's really what we're looking for input on. But to get there, we're going to kind of build up. So before we get into the differences across these methods, we're going to talk about the similarities so you kind of know what the foundation is. So across all of the different options, the number and type of files is consistent. So if you have sample data, you're going to have your data files, you'll have a method and attributes file, and as Dylan mentioned before, you'll have a data dictionary, file level metadata, locations file, and then something we didn't get into and won't get into is a sample ID and metadata file. If you have sensor data, it will be the same thing without that sample ID and metadata file. But those are the number and type of files that you have. So the differences or the changes that we're going to discuss, the options, they really focus on what is contained within the data files and the data dictionary file. So that's where we're going to focus in right now. Again, before we get into the differences, we're going to first talk about what stays the same. So in your data file, you'll have your data values. You can have flags for that data. And it's also where the method changes will show up. I'll talk about that more in a second. And notes. In your data dictionary, as Dylan mentioned earlier, all of your column and row names will be listed, and then you'll have attributes for those. So your definition for those, units, data type, and many more things. So to get more into the method changes, so this would be something that shows up in all of your data files. It will be a column. And so once again, if you have changes to your methods, like I mentioned before, with the samples were collected in bulk, that will show up as a method ID in that particular row for that, let's say, sample. It could also be for a timestamp. So that's the single approach there. Here's what it would sort of look like in this small example. So we have sample name, we have percent clay values, and then we have percent clay method change. And so you can see in that middle row for percent clay, it says -999. There is no percent clay value. There is a method change listed that theoretically is explaining why you don't have a value for that. So now that we've talked about the method changes, we're going to get into the sort of normal or typical methods and the three different options that we have. And I'm going to go through them one by one. They're all going to be structured the same way. So they're all going to have sort of this summary at the top with benefits and issues, an example, and then we're going to look at another example before we move to the next option. So the first option is having your method ID in a data file column. So this is the same thing we just talked about for the method changes, and it would in fact be combined with the method changes in a single column. So you can see in the example at the bottom, it has percent clay method ID instead of method change, and then grn01 is repeated for every single row. Any changes that you have are also listed like in that middle row. Your data dictionary doesn't say anything about your methods. This I'm going to say a few times, but will be relevant when I get to option 3. But for now, the data dictionary doesn't say anything about your methods. So the benefits of this is that you can list a method ID for every column in every file. And so if those things are different across different files, you don't have to worry about that. You can specify whatever you need to in your data file that goes with that data column. The issue is that you have to list something repeatedly. You're listing your method ID over and over and over again. And if it's the same for your entire file or all of your files, you're listing it a lot of times. So what does this look like when we get to more than one file? In this example, we have up at the top, data file 1 uses grn01 as its method ID. The option below, or the example below, data file 2 uses grn02. So the way that that shows up for each of them is percent clay data and then percent clay method ID. One of them lists 01 a bunch of times, the other one lists 02 a bunch of times. And again, nothing about methods in your data dictionary. So that's option 1. Now we're going to move to option 2. So in option 2, your method ID is still in your data file, but instead of being in a column and repeated a bunch of times, it's in a header row. And so you can see at the bottom, the example there, just above the percent clay column, it says grn01. It is listing the method ID for that entire column of data. Next to that is the percent clay method change column. And so you would only list your changes there. And again, nothing about your methods in your data dictionary. So the benefits to this are the same as for the last one. You are able to list a method ID that is specific to a column and a file. The issue is that it has metadata header rows, which can bring up different problems, and some people don't like them, and also it can introduce some programmatic difficulties. So if we get into what does this look like for more than one file, we have the same setup as we just saw. The top for one uses grn01, and you can see it at the top of the percent clay column. And then the second one, grn02, is at the top of the percent clay column. And so that's where it would show up. And again, data dictionary doesn't have anything about your methods. So there is one aside for this. I'll just give a bonus. So an additional bonus for this approach is that if you have other duplicated information, like for example, location ID, that you would be listing over and over down the whole column in your data file, you can also have another header row for that. So on the right, we see location ID and method ID as two header rows. And so it is only listed in those places and not repeated information. Okay, so that was an aside. Now we're going to go to option 3. And now you'll know why I kept mentioning data dictionary. So in option 3, the data or the method ID is not in your data file. Instead, it is listed in your data dictionary. And so if we look at the examples on the bottom, the data file has the method change, just like the other ones did, but the normal or sort of expected method shows up in the data dictionary on the right. So the data dictionary has the column name, %clay, has whatever your definition is, and then it would list also a method ID. So if we look at this for more than one file, we have a similar setup again, but this time we'll look towards the data dictionary. So the first option or the first example uses grn01. The column header is %clay. So in the data dictionary, the column is %clay and the method ID is 01. Now, for the second example, this can be handled in two different ways, and we don't need to choose one of the ways. Both of them would be accepted, but we're going to look at them both. So in one of these options, you would keep your column header consistent. It would be %clay, which means it can only be listed once in the data dictionary, which means you can only have that method ID once in the data dictionary, which means you need to have your other method somewhere else. And so where that shows up is in the method change column. So grn02 shows up in method change and it's listed over and over and over again. The other possibility here is instead of keeping your column header consistent, if you want to have the method ID be listed in your data dictionary, then you can change your column header. And so that's the other possibility here. So now we have a different column header in the second example. It's %clay method 2. And the method ID there in the data dictionary is grn02. And then in that second data file, the method change column doesn't need to list anything. So I'm gonna hop back actually because I want to look again at the benefits and issues piece. So the benefits here, you're getting your method ID for each column. It's only listed one time in one place. And so if you have the same method across all of your files that use that same column header, you only need to list it in one place. It's very clean. The issue is that if your methods do vary across your files and you want to keep your column header consistent, you now have to choose one of the options I showed. You need some kind of workaround. The other issue is that your methods information is split now between your data file and your data dictionary. So the data file has your method changes and the data dictionary has that sort of expected or typical method ID. Okay, so those were our three options. I know they were very in the weeds and I went through them probably sort of quickly. This is all of those summaries from all the slides put together. So we have one summary of options here. So just again, to review, in option 1, the method ID is in a data file column. It's combined with your method changes and it's repeated over and over again down the column. In option 2, the method ID is still in your data file, but it shows up in a header row. And then in option 3, your method ID instead is in your data dictionary. And so you can list one method ID for one column header. However many times it's used across files, it's still just going to have one method ID associated with it. Those are the options. And there are some questions I'm going to go through, so maybe we'll turn off the recording, I suppose. But